welcome to my house and also 20 minutes of poetry. I'm going to do some scientifically accurate poems. If you have any questions about the science, you can post them to the social media pages that this is being live streamed on, and I'll try and answer them afterwards. Right, I guess one of the questions I often get when I say to people that I do poetry is, what inspires you to write? By which people mean, what is wrong with you? And so I tell them, I have irritable bowel syndrome. About this condition, not much is known. Is it caused by the germs in my gut or a brain too fed up to talk sense to my stomach? Scientists flummoxed how yoga and yogurt both make it not so hurt, how antidepressants its essence has shown, but fiber could also work fine alone. And if you see me just eating butter, it's not some strange new age one-upper, it's just sometimes that's all that makes the pain better. Sometimes I wish my brain could just leave this mess of a body, but its roots run too deep. There's a billion neurons nesting in my gut that interact with tens of trillions of bacteria, possibly more than all the other cells here. Consider this fact and see it's incredible that we find anything edible, that only 10% of us feel this resent when our stomachs pouring acid on infested intestines, our passages unpackaging the gloop we've ingested. It's hardly surprising. Digestive unrest increases our chances of feeling depressed. But for me, it's when this disease of my bowel won't abate late at night that excitement keeps me awake to write poetry. See, my inspirations are bowel irritation and sleep deprivation. So any gurgling sounds you hear are the oozings of ideas that arise from the writhe of my duodenum side, for between my gut and mind we find the source of this vile, logical style. So why live in denial? It's far sweeter revealing what your gut is feeling in speech and in poem than in growl or gut groan. So for the rest of you, may I suggest that you share your own syndromes. Thank you. In case you're wondering about the source of this mysterious clapping, it's not canned laughter or canned clapping. It is, in fact, my housemate Clive, who is going to be helping out with the next piece because it requires audience participation. You don't have to feel obliged to do this if you're at home, because you might just feel weirded out by the whole thing, but you can do. So this poem goes with the theme of the things behind me. These are also due to my housemate Clive. So this is Beetles and also Under the Sea. There will be no beetles, I'm afraid, in this. However, there will be some bees, which are also very yellow. This poem is called Bees, so called because all of the words in it begin with either a B or an S, and it goes to the tune of the flight of the bumblebee. And so when I will do bee wing movements with my arms, I'd be very happy if you at home, and definitely Clive here, who is instantly joining in, are going to make buzzing sounds. Yes, there we go, let's see. Bees bring bounty, black about bodies, blocked blonde by bedecking bouquets, butterflies, belittled by said bumblebees. Better speed, spreading stamens, sandy seeds, you busy bees, bear bristly baskets, rushes, drawing blooming banquets, besides, bumblebees, sound-based strategies, stimulates, blueberries, shy seeds, sandstorm, sense scuzzing, simply, solely by such bees. Buzzing. Some believe bees soaring send science skiving, shouldn't be breeze sailing, but skydiving. Scientists say BS, sure. Some solving, some simplified. Set bees stationary, such bees subside, but bees buzz. Sound showing super speed beats, sustaining soaring by spiraling breeze. Sadly, speaking sustainably, some bee species seem seldom seen, samia, several blights, strike simultaneously, blood-sucking bugs spread by beekeeper saunter, bearing still smaller bugs. So swiftling slaughter because bee breeding brings sameness bottlenecks. Shameless siblings should seek balance by better sex. Similarly, studies see beetle slaying sprays bemusing bees. So, solutions? Some suggest banning sprays. Some suggest breeding strays, but silver bullet shan't shoot straight since several sources bring such states to start by saving bees some space. Because bees' best buds supply bees better buds. Banishing starvation, beauty so beloved supplement, stress-busting steps supporting better species spread. So beleaguered bees soon blaze back strong brazen bullets, blasting bassoon song because blissful blossoms save bees. Thank you. Excellent. Right. That's, I think, all the audience participation. But obviously you're allowed to stay around and clap if you want to.
Yeah.
But it's no longer an obligation. Right. I'm now going to move on to another animal-based poem. This time it goes out to all you fans of bird watching and also rap music. It begins with Eminem's Rap God as performed by a bald eagle. Then we have Kendrick Lamar's DNA as performed by an osprey. Nicki Minaj's Anaconda as performed by a condor. And finally, Mos Def's Mathematics as performed by a chicken. Other than the last one, they are all raptors. So the poem's called Raptor, Raptor. I'm going to have a drink first. It's beginning to be time for a raptor, some of the eagles who can rise up like the rapture, wrapped our talons around the prey we capture, capped our head with gold crown because we're the masters. The bald in bald eagle means white patch. I'm a bald eagle, I have no equal, yet I'll keep full like I'm seagull, because I still small bird's food hole, and I ransack a bin like a bit bullfinch. Sorry girl, but I'm so regal, you'll believe my diet's legal. Dollar bills, other low to me, so how you gonna call my lifestyle deceitful? I'll feed my eaglets, egrets, vagrants. I got royal feet for oiled eats, cause being an osprey, talons tear through fish, and one can twist to hold the other way. A collector's one time wiped us out in the UK, we recolonized the British Isles by flying from Norway. And though predatory, my territory is only my nest eerie breed effectively, collectively. I built my nest up yearly. I don't. No Andean condors don't. No Andean condors don't harm livestock until their lives stop. To find fresh flesh, follow vultures who can smell mutualistic coexistence because they need our beaks as well. We can bite through hide and even crush up though each day we fly. Marathons around our home. What I see? Could it be someone left a fresh kill for me? So I tear that body open with the corpuscles of potions that make us fall like dominoes when we start overdosing. Oh my God. Look at her beak. Look at her booka. Haha. Chicken. Wandering jungle fowl, too tame to break 3 from A4-page lies. You take 5-day-old chicks, they can add and subtract when 6-month-old kids may struggle with that. You 7 ties with mum who Mos Def innately counted and chirped with her chicks before they hatched. 19 billion of us survive being crushed alive at birth. In gendercide of non-egg providing males whose lower worth as bodily commodities means you won't even make us into stocks. All this, and somehow we're the bunch of cocks. It's chickenomics. Thank you. Just obviously, so as I mentioned earlier, chickens are not a type of raptor. The other factual inaccuracy at the moment in that one is that it's no longer just 19 billion, it's now something like 25 billion chickens in the world. I'm not updating that one though, because the original song at this point has 9 planets. So it's also like no longer true, but was true at one point. So I'm keeping with that. Right. What am I doing next? Oh, yes. Okay. We're going to tone it down a little bit and do a more quiet poem about roots. Oh, sorry. The other thing I was going to mention at this point, if you haven't heard and have interest in both rap music and also bird watching, you might have wanted to check out Black Birders Week, which was 2 weeks ago and had lots of stuff by Black people who are very interested in the natural world and have been taking photos and sharing their experiences of this. And yeah, you can check out that on Twitter or Instagram or anything else where you interact with the social media.
Say what it was called again?
Black Birders Week. Hashtag Black Birders Week. Yes. Anyway, talking about going back to the things that we all enjoy, which is obviously the natural world, all of us. And in this case, this poem's called Roots. We talk of going back to our roots, like we will find meaning buried in gnarled histories underground, but roots are not some unearned ancestral gifts. They are alive, grow and die, daily outstretching fresh fingers to squelch through the mess of rock and death and tiny life we call Earth, in search of survival. Ask the trees, and they will tell you. Earth doesn't just connect itself to soil, it networks with a whole group of fungi looking through the crumbly darkness, looking for precious gifts, phosphorus, nitrates. Plants communicate with plants through this mesh of white threads, and to better swap their sugars for these substances, roots will work on plants inside their cell to hug them deep inside the skin. Most of our food depends on this process. Ask the trees. They will tell you. Earth is only ever rented, and everything in it moves. If you want to stay planted, you must extend your roots. Thank you. Holding it down. I'm going to now change scene. So, theoretically, this will work. You can now see an image of these roots. So this is your plant, and here are actually how these fungi grow inside it and either wrap around or grow these tiny gift trees. They're called arbuscular mycorrhiza inside. Just thought you might like to know. There we go. We're going to continue with the sea theme now, so you might notice there's a bit of a sea theme going on, mostly accidentally, but anyway, we're going to go with it. This poem, which I'm going to read, is called Bobtail Squid, Hawaiian Bobtail Squid being this. Hawaiian bobtail squid are born as wide-eyed mustaches under a speckled hood. Phantom babies scared of their own shadows, so they sift the night water for specific bacteria and tickle them into a pouch. The bacteria live counting themselves. Are we enough to act? Will the world notice us? And when they hear the echoed yes, 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 they luminesce. This is what the squid want, to devour their own shadows. Every night, they will feed their pouch until it shines. To the teeth that wait below, they become moonlight. When the night is over, and the squid slither down to sleep in the sand, they vomit forth their brightness until their insides dim in loneliness, and the sea is enriched with tomorrow light. When you talk of hiding in light-hearted poems, I wonder, are you looking for buoyancy or to make your viscera luminous? I'm going to continue with the sea theme for another poem. This is about sea anemones. So this is my brief sketch of a sea anemone and a green thing, what lives in it. Some cells see anemones as being their enemies, but several sorts of algae are hardly separate entities. They, in a process called endosymbiosis, live inside their hostess closeness without protest, swapping their sweet sugars for the safe seats it delivers, protected by these toxic spines if they should need assistance. But this curious pedigree found inside the anemone goes another layer deeper. See, the algae all are Russian dolls that once ate other algae that hold chloroplasts, which in the past lived on their own. These now harmless creatures back then were known as cyanobacteria and caused such hysteria when they first filled the earth with this toxin that we call oxygen. Highly reactive. It found life, attacked it. The body piled higher till we learned to respire. What was waste was endorsed and was made a resource. Now we breathe these exhaust fumes as we all consume food made by these awesome bacterial communes, because not all were digested. Some just arrested inside a cell where in good health they photosynthesize, barely realize a speeder and fowler become one alga. Inside an anemone, and in and around this could be a clownfish. And they're all trying to kill each other. Remember, these sea anemones don't dance purely by chance, and they're not plants. They're poison-stinging, paralysis or death-bringing animals. Only Nemo's immune to their sting harpoon. His mucus coat means he can gloat safe from predation, luring snacks into his own habitation, because phenomenally, this lemony green anemone seems cleaned by a nominally prey species, as they both breathe poison oxygen from within. It seems home is where you're immune to the neurotoxin. Thank you. Oh, okay. Yes. So, continuing straight on, obviously this is Pride Month, and it's also, it wasn't really supposed to be anything to do with Black Birders Month or Black Lives Matter, but that's an issue that's been triggered recently, and so we're going to need to spend some time addressing that. I'm mostly going to be talking about rainbows from a physics perspective, because that's kind of my thing. And hopefully there'll be some analogies in there that people find useful for whatever it is going on in their life. So yeah, here's a diagram of a spectrum, as you might call a rainbow from a scientific perspective. Spectrum is slightly more general. It applies to any sort of line of variation, which is infinitely divisible like this. It's interesting to consider one thing, though, which this is not imposed on a blue background. So if you have a rainbow on a blue background, you might say, okay, there's all these colors and then there's blue either side. But because I've got this on a black background, you notice that it kind of ends, even though the light spectrum doesn't. So the real rainbow continues infinitely over both ends, whereas the visible rainbow obviously just sort of stops being visible at some point. Anyway, here's the poem Rainbow. To celebrate its diversity, South Africa became the Rainbow Nation. There are a few problems with this. Black isn't on the rainbow. White isn't on the rainbow. Brown isn't on the rainbow. Pink isn't on the rainbow. No one's actual skin color is on the rainbow. How can this be when a rainbow shows every type of light? Well, to understand this, you must know that our eyes have 3 color sensors, so can't tell a mix of blue light and green from the aquamarine that lies in between. But no red plus purple isn't myrtle. So you invent a color, magenta. Discover the rainbow is not enough. You must add pink. This prompts you to think things reflect the whole spectrum to different extents, and some colors don't exist if we get too intense. To find brown, tone things down, because the same light could look orange or yellow, like grey looks white, when the dimness around it makes it look bright. The amount reflected matters too. Look, what I'm trying to tell you is colours complex, context dependent, curiously hard to see how we can judge by the colour of skin, whatever kind of content lies within, when we can't even pick out from that shade the actual light waves overlaid. So when we talk of a rainbow of people or preferences, understand that our language has limited references because people don't fall on a line any more than they fit into boxes. A spectrum is too small an infinity to capture personality. So if you've had a dream where real people can be seen because they know what eyes and words don't show, then you can find me somewhere over the rainbow. Thank you. The other thing that I think we have all observed as a result of lockdown is not being able to go out and not being able to interact with people in a physical and touchy way. And I think one of the consequences of that is, firstly, that we all need to stretch more. And I think it's very healthy to have a lot of stretches in your day. And this should trigger our awareness of our body itself. And so this poem is called Proprioception, which is your sense of how your body is it's holding itself. I wish there were a shorter word for proprioception, that inner sense of your own poise, how your weight holds your sinews, how bone relates to bone. I wish the word sounded more casual, so you could talk about it normally, like, I saw a flower, I smelt a flower, I propriocept unslouching closer, not the image of movement, but how gravity of beauty feels. I wish there were a word for it other than feel, all fingertip and surface, and nothing of what your marrow knows. I wish we had a word for lungs, not based on dissection, but on breath, on the tightness of despair, on the shattering exaltation of the universe leaking into your core. I used to think it strange that for most of human history we have had no word for green, yet here we are still, piecing balanced on my heels, like I didn't need to know 50 types of unstable before I could talk. to learn the difference between walking and falling through finding every grade in between. I wish there were a shorter word for proprioception, so we would know the hollowness of skin, so that I would not have to explain again the space between drag queen and woman, how you can look hunched but know yourself upright, so that when we are unanchored, contorted in our own depths, we could share the shape of our souls. Finally, I'm going to finish off standing with a poem that is about my actual research. So this, my research is in climate sciences, and I look at different types of emissions, but I'm for the moment just going to talk about CO2, which is the main one I think most people hear about. And I have done a bit of research on trying to attain like the cost of CO2 to society. So this poem is about the social cost of carbon. It's called Too Much CO2 because words with more than 3 letters must contain a C and no. Carbon concentrations rocket. Consequences catastrophic. For the concentrations control atmospheric optic echoes. Our cocooning gas contorts a comfy day to be a scorcher as our oceans all become acidulous, and one by one falls locals all to run. Avaricious for resources, carbon coffers cloud discourses, woo political discord by reproaching consumer forces. In draconic economics, actors are conceived atomic, so we do not contemplate competitors, cooperate. In a contactless context, we clot, condemn the concept of social cost, but touch converts cogs to community. To connect is to fix. If we connect oscillating electronics, elections and ecologic, we can construct a collective economics. For we have but one air to lap up sin and but one air to fan all kin. We are all lit by but one sun. We die and rot in but one bed, and all the gas our ash has fed can go up in one conflagration. Thank you. So that's all of my poems that I'm going to do. If there are any questions, I can answer them. Oh, I've had a few questions here. Ooh, from Debbie, which came first, your love of poetry or love of the natural world, and how to come together? So I would say that I probably got into science long before I got into poetry. I've always done a lot of reading. I guess I got given like a science encyclopedia when I was, I don't know, something like 6, maybe 7. And I sort of read the entirety of it and loved it. It was a child's encyclopedia. It wasn't like huge, but yeah, it was, I think that was what got me into it. And I've been writing poetry for a long time, but mostly page poetry. So there's more performance poetry. It's a bit more sort of like alive in a way, whereas page poetry maybe is a bit more contemplative. So I'm sort of trying to bring at least a little bit of stagecraft into what I'm doing. But that really only started about 6 years ago. And they came together when there was a competition for science communication. And the same week, a friend of mine was running a poetry slam, which I'd never heard of before. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll write a science poem, science poem, and then I can just do it with both of them, and it'll save time and, save effort. And I did reasonably well in both competitions and felt like this was a thing that's working, so I just did lots more of it. And so yeah, I've continue with that. So yeah, I guess rap is just like an aspect of it that works particularly well on stage. I think that like rap doesn't work at all on paper. So I generally describe myself as a performance poet rather than a rapper, but I'm happy for other people to call me rappers. It just sounds, yeah, it's, I guess, not how I think about myself. Sorry, that was, I'm now responding to a second question from Rob, which is how should I develop the idea of science? Now, there are other like science rappers who are, let's say, maybe a bit better than me at doing the rap side of things and maybe would incorporate more music than I do. Thermoflynamics is someone you can find on definitely Twitter. And what's the other name? I've forgotten his, Baba Brinkman, I think, is the other science rapper who does like rap with music in the background, if that's more what you're after. Yeah. And then I've got a question from Kelly. What's your journey from science, from physics to poetry? So I think I've mostly covered that now. And yeah, so for me, like, it's not that like the science itself is different. It's more about how you communicate the science to people. And like poetry is something that people are intrinsically interested in exploring. And I try and use that to communicate science, because like scientists off in their tower, like thinking up science, isn't really much use to anyone, particularly if you're working on something with a lot of social implications like climate change. You really want to communicate to people the ideas that you come up with. And also you just want to communicate with scientists. Like the ideas that science communication is just for non-scientists is actually completely wrong. Like the majority of scientists aren't specialists in your field. And actually the way you talk to someone who's not a specific specialist in your field is basically the same as how you talk to the general public. Maybe you can use a bit more maths or something, but realistically, if you want to create collaborations between different aspects of science, you're kind of better off having a more like poetic approach to it, so that other non-specialist scientists can also follow along. I think that's those questions answered. Yeah. Do any other scientists in your department harbor secret poetic inclinations? In my department, well, I think one person has mentioned that he does quite like poetry, but he hasn't written any that I've seen, so I'll keep his secret for the moment. Having said that, if you are going to follow either me or Grantham Institute on Twitter, so Grantham Institute at Imperial College is where I work, we are going to be running a science Slack for climate poetry. And I'm hoping that this will tempt a few people out of the woodwork, maybe from our department, but also for the wider audience. We want to get non-specialists involved as well, and just see what people can say about the environment in a scientifically accurate way that is also poetically inspiring. If you're interested in other people, maybe not at my department, Sam Illingworth is also a climate scientist who does a lot of science poetry. He now works professionally as a science communicator rather than as a climate researcher, but that's his background. And there's Rachel, someone else at the Met Office, who works on climate science and also poetry. Yeah, and another person who's involved in sort of like climate science poetry field is Tom Denby. He actually doesn't write very much about climate science, but he works on various things to do with climate science and also does a lot of really good poetry. So yeah, there's a number of people. I have to say that the majority of people who do this don't always bring their science to their poetry and their poetry to their science. And that's definitely something I want to help bring out in people. I hope, so the question is performance poetry a good way to engage school children with science? I definitely hope so. I think that you need to be very careful with it though, because a lot of the time I found that my poetry is not really aimed at people who don't at least have some grasp of long words. So I think that the type of poetry I would do for school children is not the same as the type of poetry that I'll do for like the 12 plus age range. I generally say my poetry is like 12 plus, just because we need to understand some basic concepts to get it. And you can do poetry for younger children. I think it makes it more gripping. And definitely I've seen a lot of work done with science music. So Clive is my housemate who does music teaching, but also occasionally you find a nice science song and you sort of double up your lessons, as it were. And I think that's something that teachers, particularly since the arts is being like under pressure now, are going to find that they need to do to sort of use their artistic ability to communicate things from other topics, partly just as a way to justify why they're on the timetable, because they're under stress. Last question: do you have a CD or recording anywhere? I'm afraid I don't. I do have YouTube, but I'm working on a book that it doesn't exist at the moment. Sorry about that. No, there is no way you can give me money. Sorry. Yeah, sorry, that was in response to the question. Yeah, do you have a CD? Yes, sorry, I think those are all the questions. All right, well, thank you for watching and listening, or I assume you've been doing at least one of those two. Yeah, and yeah, keep in touch if you have any more questions about science and poetry and any of the sort of science that I've been talking about so far.